here at Lamont. Uh, as with many roles at Lamont, we wear a number of hats, but the majority of mine fall into admission, recruiting, and financial aid. I've been here for about 6 years in January. My background is I started as a trumpet player in undergrad and then switched over to classical voice halfway through that, and then went through grad school in classical voice. And when I decided to work at Lamont, I was drawn to, well, I wanted to be in Denver for one, as just a wonderful city. And much of what that video said, right? I was attracted to the mix of studying and being around people who study and make beautiful music of all different types, but in an environment that was not so large that it felt impersonal. I wanted to be in an administrative role where I felt like I knew the students and faculty, and while not sacrificing the opportunities that were there. And so I'll hand this over to Director Ward. Keith, would you take it away?
Thank you, Stephen. And I want to also offer my own words of welcome. It's great to have you here. And it's great that you would come and answer my invitation in the video to come and learn more about us, and it brings you here today. I serve as the director of the School of Music, so I oversee the entire program. This is my third year at Lamont, and I am a pianist. My degrees are in piano. In the video, you were able to hear some of the things that I think are special about Lamont. In my talking about a sweet spot, something similar to what Stephen had just described. But since I've come here, of course, in becoming part of this community, there are things that are very special to me. I think our students who are very engaging. We have an outstanding professional staff, of which Stephen is a good example of. We also have a very impressive faculty of performers, of composers, conductors, scholars, music theorists, pedagogues. And we all work within this very vibrant musical community, a place that has a sense of community. And for me, that's what leads me to looking forward to coming to work every day, or hopping on Zoom right now every day. And I will turn it over to Jack.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Jack Sheinbaum, and I've got two roles here at Lamont. I'm a faculty member, so I'm a musicologist, which is a sort of fancy way of saying a music historian. And I also serve the school as the school's associate director for academic affairs. So I help to oversee the curriculum and advising primarily. I've been at Lamont for a while. This is now my 21st year here at Lamont, and 9 or 10 years in this administrative role, but I've been here as a faculty member now for over 2 decades, which is hard for me to believe. And what really attracts me to Lamont, what attracted me to Lamont, and what has kept me here all this time is that I have really loved how friendly, how warm everyone is, and I also really love how flexible the school is. I am very much attuned to students that want to do lots of different things, and the way that the faculty and the administration kind of come together with the staff to help students be able to do all the different sorts of things that they want to be able to do.
Thanks, guys. So I mentioned before the video, there's that Q&A functionality in the menu down at the bottom of Zoom. If you click that, you can type in your questions into that box, and like I say, hopefully we'll be able to answer all of the questions you have. And before we launch into that, we wanted to acknowledge that, of course, we're on Zoom for a reason, right? We are doing what we do during a pandemic, and it's affected every aspect of our lives. And so I wanted to spend a little time briefly asking Director Ward to just share a little bit about how Lamont has done what it is we do, has continued our educational pursuit this fall and during the pandemic.
Good. Thank you, Stephen. Yes, there is a big question. How do you make music during a pandemic, particularly during the COVID pandemic? Music has certainly been in the news, and is something that we want to make sure that in our approach to it, the first two crucial criteria are health and safety. We want to make sure that our community, which includes students, faculty, staff, is safe, and that we are following the most up-to-date protocols. And we also are following those protocols with the most up-to-date information that we can have, that we can find. I can tell you that I personally attend a number of webinars that present research on aerosols and the like, something that I've been doing, well, since they started this summer, so that I can be most informed in my participation when we're writing protocols, when we're writing procedures in university policy. Another thing that we do that helps us with this is that we have been working with a scientist on the DU faculty. He's a biochemist and chemist who specializes in aerosols. So what it means is that we are working with a scientist to inform our decisions. And in doing this, we worked with him and continue to work with him on developing models that are specific to the spaces at DU. So specific to the spaces that we teach in, that we perform in the Lamont School of Music. This means that we've developed models that take in a myriad of factors into consideration. What is the size of the room? What are the air circulation rates? Issues of social distancing. Also keeping in mind social distancing is something that varies by instrument. So are you playing a non-wind instrument, or are you a singer, as opposed to playing a wind instrument? So again, all of this is informed by the most up-to-date research that we have. We even looked at standard exhalation rates. We looked at the length of practice or performance and the building in of buffer zones, of emptying the spaces to make sure that there is time for any accumulation of air to, to be freshened. We determine maximum occupancy rates, looking at all these different models. We've monitored our rehearsal spaces with carbon dioxide readers. The purpose of that is to get a better understanding of circulation, of how is circulation operating. So again, we're trying to find data to help inform us on matters, in this case, of air circulation. We also bought special masks for musicians, and as well, we bought bell covers for wind instruments. Now, the result of all of this, so this very concentrated, hands-on, constantly assessing process, has had great results. The first is that there have been no COVID, now that the quarter has ended, we had no COVID clusters in the Newman Center of the Performing Arts. The Newman Center of the Performing Arts is that magnificent building in which the Lamont School of Music resides. We also, this past quarter, produced nearly 50 concerts. All of them were streamed. There were no live audiences, so everything was over the web. Our ensembles were smaller, but we had ensemble stream performances, as well as we did have students giving solo recitals and the like. So I feel like this past fall was a time that really just brought out the best in all of us, that we went forward finding the very best and most accurate and up-to-date information that we could find. We worked collaboratively with colleagues in other departments, as well as the administration at DU. And by looking at the results, we created a safe environment.
Thanks, Heath. some of the questions are coming in. Jessica, thank you for asking this. She asks, can students switch into a music major after arriving at DU freshman year? And the answer is yes. You'll find that when you submit the Common App as an undergrad or the Pioneer App as an undergrad, you can only select one major on that application. And so it's common for folks who are interested in adding music in some capacity or adding a non-music pursuit if they're already a music major. It's common for them to reach out and say, wait, how do I do this, right? So simply put, Jessica, if you are interested in adding a major, once you get here, that's fine. It's also possible to email us and audition and be considered for a major during the normal admission process. So if you were to email us and say, hey, I'm a business major, but I'm interested in participating in Lamont, perhaps as a double major, what's the process? And we can do that for you, even though you're applying as a business major. Similarly, if you show up as a business major and after some time think, I want to get involved at Lamont, there are a number of possibilities. Adding a major is certainly one of them. The further you get away from that first year, the more difficult combining a second major for a second degree is. But even if that isn't what you'd like to do, you can minor, you can participate in ensembles, you can take a number of our classes as a non-major. So, and maybe I'll drop that in the chat for you all, the link to the opportunities for non-majors. So Jessica, I hope that answers your question. It is also similar to questions we get a lot, which are just general questions about whether or not someone can double major at DU. And Keith mentioned in our video that we are part of this liberal arts college that is part of this larger research institution. And so I'm wondering, Jack, if you wouldn't mind just talking a little bit about kind of the possibilities there or how common that is for our students and stuff.
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, the main thing that we're always interested in is finding the right match between students and the curriculum, right? So that they're doing what it is that they want to do. From the biggest perspective, the way to think about this, at least on the undergraduate side, is that we have a BA music major, but there's also the more professional Bachelor of Music degree, where we have 4 different majors in performance, in jazz studies, in composition, and in recording and production. And the way that this works generally is that, I mean, the reason why I bring it up now is because it speaks to the flexibility, or if someone wants to do a double major, if someone wants to switch into music later, is that a BA has roughly 1/3 of the credits in music and 2/3 of the credits outside, and the Bachelor of Music degree has about the reverse. About 2/3 of the credits are in music with 1/3 outside. So most of our students who are BA students choose to be BAs because they want to be a double major. They want to major in something else outside of music, along with music. So the overwhelming majority of our BAs do a double major. But even within the Bachelor of Music, we have students that are moving around. Sometimes students will pursue, at this point it would be sort of a dual degree, right? Like a Bachelor of Music in Performance along with a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry or something like this. So there's a lot of flexibility that is built in, so that we can help students really find their individual path.
Great, thanks, Jack. We had a question from Lane about the recording and production degree at DU. Broadly speaking, Lane, that's one of our most popular programs. It is relatively small. We look to admit about 5 undergrads, or have 5 undergrads come in each year in that program. So about 20 max at any given time. It's only an undergrad program. And one of the purposes of that is just simply that you get as much individual time with faculty and with the equipment as possible, right? And I would say that our recording and production students are very pleased with the program, but one of the reasons for that is that we do over 300 performances a year, and our recording and production students are often quite involved in that. And so I think that's a general overview. It is a performance program still, in that it requires an audition or a portfolio in a musical area. And so, Lane, make sure that as you look through that, you realize that there is kind of a 2-tiered part of that. You submit the recording production stuff, but you also perform an audition. And the reason is that our philosophy is that the best producers know what it's like on both sides of the mic, right? That have gone through that musical education and are really able to speak the language, not just of the engineering, but of the music. And then Greta asked a question about financial aid. She asked specifically about international students, but great opportunity to talk about some of those options at Lamont. You may have seen that we did a webinar on this recently. It was a little more focused on domestic undergraduate students, but there's still a lot there. And so check out our YouTube video or YouTube channel to learn more about that. But Greta, largely speaking, so undergrads, you go through the audition process. Lamont handles all of the institutional aid, which is to say that we do one scholarship, the Lamont Scholarship, that takes into account your musical ability on the basis of your audition or your portfolio, your academic ability on the basis of your application and academic history, and your financial need on the basis of the FAFSA and the CSS profile. We look at that and then we take all of that data in, we look at what the needs are of the school, and we try and balance this class and make it affordable for any of our admitted students. And so aside from those financial need elements, you don't really need to do anything special to be considered for the depth and breadth of our financial aid. Graduates are very similar. And Greta, I'm not sure if you're a graduate student or undergraduate student, but either way, international students are considered for all of our aid as well. So because there isn't the ability to gauge financial need in the same way for international students, we're looking more on the basis of academic merit and musical merit. On the graduate side, we have graduate teaching assistantships, which provide a small stipend to go along with a scholarship that usually requires you to then teach lessons on your instrument. There are some other jobs as well. And then we have endowed scholarship and graduate dean scholarship. And similar to undergrad, you don't have to do anything special to be considered for scholarships in your area. And in Greta, that can range anywhere from $1,000 to full tuition. So again, you don't have to do anything special to be considered for as much scholarship as possible. Let's see here. Jack or Keith, as I'm looking through some of these questions, would either of you care to answer Abby's question about how you would describe the atmosphere at Lamont?
Sure. Maybe both Jack and I could respond to that. One thing that I find that of the atmosphere in Lamont is that it is a welcoming place. It is a place where as I mentioned earlier, there tends to be a sense of community. And I'd also say a level of creativity. One example that I'll just use right away, that one of the students, a current student, developed a podcast called The Rose Room, and has decided in sort of an entrepreneurial spirit ways that she wants to create this as sort of a national undertaking that would include podcasts from other schools of music throughout the country. So I use that as just an example of a sense of creativity and entrepreneurship that I see in a place that has a community that has to me, just a warm and welcoming spirit.
Thanks, Keith. Yeah, and as you were saying that, I thought I would also add a couple of things about the community feeling and the way that it's built into the program, to the curriculum as well. So not only is it happening, let's say at a grassroots level, right, where all of these sorts of things are happening, but also the way that the curriculum is designed is for cohorts, different sorts of cohorts to form. So of course, as you go through school in your class, you very often are making very fast friends with people kind of in your class, in your area, but then also there are things, let's say, where each studio has a weekly, and each area has kind of weekly performance class and studio class, where students are regularly getting together, playing for each other, commenting on each other's playing, and then also doing social things as well. And then this extends all the way to the whole school level, where a number of times every quarter we have an entire Lamont convocation. And we've been doing it virtually since March as well, where the entire school is coming together for performances, either for each other, faculty performing, performing, or students performing for everyone, or guest artists performing to create that sense of community. So it's happening at lots of different levels, and is really it's kind of the entire school is sort of shot through with creating this community feeling.
Jack, I was wondering, would you like to talk about how the architecture or the design of the building actually helps support that? That is in the size of the classrooms.
Sure, and I'd be happy to. This was one of those things, I've actually been here long enough, I'm like the old person now, where I was here before this building was built. They had broken ground on the building, but it wasn't, it was a hole in the ground when I first got to Lamont, and the first 2 years were in a different building. And one of the things that really struck me when I was first here is that even though, how would I say it? Even though each undergraduate class, let's say, is aimed to be, 50 or so students, we didn't build any classrooms that were that size. We built smaller classrooms. So the way that I often think of it is that it's literally like baked into the architecture of the building, that we can't just have sort of big, faceless kinds of experiences. But instead, in my own area, in musicology and music history, we teach all of our classes in 2 different sections because the whole class won't fit in the classrooms, right? So we did it on purpose so that we could have smaller, more discussion-oriented classes. And again, I think that's something that creates a pretty special feeling at Lamont.
Jack, there were a few questions in there. You've kind of touched on this. I don't know if there's anything else you would like to say about the ability to cross-pollinate within music. We've talked a little bit about the flexibility outside of music, how to double major and how the different degrees work. But like, for example, Aaron asks about, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong one, but the ability to do some jazz guitar while you're majoring in composition and so on and so forth. Is there anything you'd like to add about the flexibility within Lamont?
Sure. Yeah, this is happening all the time, and partly, right, that's again because that's what actual musicians want to do, right? If you come in and you just want to play your instrument in the most traditional way, then the program supports that. But lots and lots of students want to do other sorts of things, want to play classical music and play jazz and commercial music, or want to be exploring a second instrument that they have, or exploring singing while they're working on their instrument. And so lots of these opportunities do exist. Very often they can happen in a curricular way, but often they can also happen in an informal way by taking additional lessons, additional ensembles, additional sorts of classes, and this sort of thing happens all the time. I just yesterday had a long conversation with a graduate student who is a trumpet player, and he is here officially as a classical trumpet player, but he's also very interested in jazz, and so we were talking through all the different ways that he can be doing both things while he is still pursuing the degree that he is here to do, and without having to pay lots of extra money to fulfill lots of extra requirements. So there's a lot of flexibility on the part of the faculty to support this, and also amongst the administration to support all these different ways that our students want to make music. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, and folks, follow up in the Q&A if you'd like to hear follow-ups on any of these answers we're giving you. I notice there is a question from William about the benefits of choosing music as a minor instead of a major. And again, Jack, would you mind kind of talking about why someone would do one over the other?
Sure. Yeah, the minor in music is it is like all the minors at DU. It's a very small number of credits, and it's not, it's aimed widely so that people that want to get involved with music making can do that. So the minor has a little bit of music making. It has a year's worth of lessons, a year's worth of ensembles. It has a few music theory classes and a couple of music history classes. This sort of thing. What's nice about it is that all of these are minimums. So if a student does these but wants to do more ensembles, they can do more. They can take more lessons beyond the requirement. They can take more classes. So it allows a student to be able to sort of do a minor, but also to be able to go much further without having to worry about all the requirements you'd have to fulfill as a major. And this happens on the other end as well, by the way, where students in music, very often, if they're not going to do a major outside of music, there are lots of students that want to do a minor outside of music, whether it's at the business school or in some other liberal arts pursuit or any of the other fields that are available at the university.
Thank you. And Keith and Jack, as you scroll through the Q&A, feel free to jump in and answer any of them that you'd like. I'm answering some of them via chat as well. Let's see. Jesus, you have a question about being from Southern California, what it's like having seasons. I'll answer this one because I'm from Phoenix, Arizona originally, and I also did my undergrad in Colorado. And so it was a bit surprising to me to get here and experience snow. But since then, I've lived out east in the Mid-Atlantic where humidity is an actual thing. Here, I mean, honestly, I know that it may seem like we get paid to say this, but Denver weather is great. it's really great because in the summer, it doesn't get too hot, but it's definitely nice and warm, and it's dry, so you don't have that humidity. The spring and the fall are a little shorter than I'd like them to be, but they are beautiful. Seeing the aspens change is one of the highlights of my family's year for sure. And in the winter, which I think we're known for having a little more snow and a little more severe winters, but one of the nice things about Colorado, or Denver in particular, is that it can snow one day and we'll get 8 inches of snow and then it'll be melted in 2 days because the next day it'll be 60 degrees and it'll be, so you don't really have that situation where it's just gray and dreary for the entire long summer. Like really, there are great gaps in between that. So from one warm weather child to another, right? Warm weather native to another. It's a great place to live.
I'll jump in with something. I see that Rachel asked about opportunities with regards to new music and student composers and a new music ensemble and things like that. And so, I mean, the basic answer is yes, that there is a new music ensemble, a modern music ensemble, that lots of students, it's really a huge success because there aren't students really that I think are assigned to this ensemble. Students kind of choose to do this ensemble, and every year we have dozens and dozens of students that do this. And so it actually becomes a bit of a logistical challenge because the faculty that are coaching these ensembles have to take the students that are signing up for it and think about splitting up into various groups and chamber groups and finding the right repertoire. And so it's like a hotbed of creativity. It's really exciting how much activity is going on in the new music ensemble that we have. And for the composing students at the school, they also get lots of opportunities. Every single quarter, there is a series of what we call kind of the composers' concerts. And so they are having large ensembles read their works, they're having chamber ensembles perform their work. So every single quarter, they're having works performed. So there is a lot of new music that is happening at the university. At Lamont. One thing that I've noticed over the years is the repertoire for students that win the, let's say, the chamber music competition and solo competitions and things like this. And I think it really used to be a couple of decades ago that it was largely concentrated kind of in the Romantic era. There's a lot of works from the 1800s that would win. And now it's very common that there isn't a single thing from before the 20th century, that it's all 20th century and 21st century music that students are playing that are winning the top awards at the school as well. It's really exciting to see how much new music is going on.
In terms of opportunities, I saw one question come in. I don't know if either of you would like to answer the question about performance opportunities inside Lamont and the Denver area. This student was planning on majoring in voice, but I think that that's a question that will apply kind of across the board.
Yes, Well, within Lamont, there is a myriad of opportunities, either in small ensembles, some of the ones that Jack was just describing as for contemporary music, but there are also traditional ensembles as well, such as string quartets and the like. And then, of course, our large ensembles are performing every quarter. The orchestra, for example, performs 2 to 3 concerts every quarter. The wind ensemble performs about 2, does perform 2 every quarter. The choral groups typically have 1 concert per quarter. But there are lots of opportunities off campus. We have students who are playing in a lot of the in jazz clubs. We have students who are active either in church choirs or in semi-professional choirs. So there's quite a bit of activity, and there are quite a number of opportunities in Denver to make music and to listen and hear music. And as an example, I want to bring in an article. This was published in the Denver Post, January 25th, 2020. And it's an article that cites a study by the National Endowment for the Arts. So this is not our study. This is NEA's study. And it reports that more people attend arts events in Denver than in any other United States city. And again, this is according to the NEA. Here, or maybe I'll hold that up so you can see there it is. I'm not making it up. There it is. But I'll just read 2 very brief excerpts on this because to give a sense of what does that mean. I mean, that's a wonderful headline. What does it mean? This is what it means. Colorado has surpassed the rest of the nation in arts performance and exhibition attendance, according to a survey by the National Endowments for the Arts. The study collected data from adults over the age of 18 from across the United States. The Denver, Aurora, Lakewood area leads the top 35 metropolitan statistical areas with a 76.8% attendance rate at performing arts events, compared to the national average of 48.5%. According to the NEA, more Denverites went to plays, concerts, or dance performances than anyone else in the country this past year. This is, of course, also pre-COVID as well. So I'm similar to so many other metropolitan areas. Beginning in March, many theaters and ensembles shut down or just went online. It also goes on, it says, in the NEA's 2016 study, Colorado ranked #1 in the percentage of residents who personally perform or create artwork. That year, Colorado also took 2nd place in movie attendance and 3rd place for reading literature and attending music, dance, and theater performances. Now, what this article does not say, it's not saying that, say, we have more arts events than New York City or Los Angeles, major metropolitan areas. What it does say is that the percentage of the population that has an interest in the arts is higher, which is a way of saying that in coming to Denver or in coming to Lamont and being part of this milieu, you're coming into an environment where the arts are alive and vibrant. It's a very special thing that I think is part of Lamont being in Denver.
Absolutely. Thanks, Keith, for sharing that. There are a couple questions in there that are related to the audition process. And so I'd like to just answer those really quick. Helen, so you asked about how the audition process works on our end and how do we evaluate and decide on the applicants. So this is a very faculty-driven process. And so this year, since we're not doing in-person auditions due to the pandemic, you will submit a recorded audition of your audition rep and have a Zoom interview with the faculty in late January, early February. And the idea is that the faculty will set what they would like to hear, and you can find that on our website. And then they will listen to a a ton of people, right, play through their rep. And really, I'll speak generally because the specifics are going to be determined by the faculty in your area. And Helen, if you want to drop in what it is you do, I can give you some contact information for a faculty member in that area so you can continue this conversation. But generally, I mean, obviously they're listening for how well you make music, right? How well your facility on the instrument, how well you do what it is you are planning to major in here at Lamont. They're also, our faculty are experts in hearing potential, right? So they are not necessarily expecting you to come in and play a Yo-Yo Ma level cello audition, right? They're listening for what it is you can say through your music, and they're listening for the building blocks, right? How can we get you to the next level? So Helen, there isn't a real cut and dried answer for that. It's definitely an artistic endeavor, right? And it is part of the larger holistic admission process where we will look at your application, your background, that sort of thing. Related to that, Jack, you mentioned ensemble opportunities at all skill levels. Because you're required to audition in order to be admitted to Lamont, if you are admitted to Lamont, we are saying you are qualified to play in our ensembles if you're a major, right? There are some variation within the ensembles or in the ensembles within Lamont, and there is a separate ensemble audition process once you arrive in the fall, where you'll be put into the groups that best suit you. But you should not worry about being admitted to Lamont and then coming here and not being placed in an ensemble and getting any performance opportunities, because being admitted to Lamont is telling you that you're at that level.
Stephen, are you still here?
I am. Did I disappear?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Sorry, guys. You can hear me though, so that's good. That's the important part, I suppose.
Yeah. Some folks I see are asking in the chat about particular majors, particular programs. I don't know if you think we should spend a little bit of time talking about those, or if those would be best handled with kind of one-on-one conversations.
Yeah, so some of these in here I have responded to saying, hey, reach out to me, shoot me an email, because some of those will be a little better handled if you and I just sit down in a Zoom meeting and walk through your interests and walk through the requirements of the program. I saw some general questions about the jazz program. I think, Jack, you mentioned a lot about kind of how the Bachelor of Music and the Bachelor of Arts are different and offer different things. I mean, other than that, Jack, I would just say that the Jazz Studies program, the Bachelor of Music program in particular, is still a heavily performance-focused program, right? We are hoping to get you as many opportunities as possible while providing that foundation of the music academics. It's just in the jazz area. And so maybe, Jack, it'd be worthwhile to talk just briefly about how there are two tracks, and how for a jazz major you will actually take some distinct coursework that classical performers aren't taking.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the biggest piece of this is that all of the undergrads, for instance, do a 2-year sequence of music theory and aural skills, and the jazz and commercial music students have an entire sequence that is built around that sort of music making, whereas the, so to speak, classical students have a sequence that is built around that sort of music making. And we still have plenty of students that kind of cross-pollinate and do some of both. But I think what's nice about that is that with whatever your particular practice is within music, that's going to be how your classes are tailored and how your performance experiences are tailored. So you're able to sort of go as deep as you want to go with your music making, but also that there's a lot of breadth that you can expand beyond your particular niche, if that's where your interests lie as well. And in the case of, let's say, the recording and production major, both of those sequences are available depending on the performance area. So I mean, this is one of the things that I think is really nice about this, that if you're a composition major, classical composition or jazz composition, you're still performing in ensembles. If you're a recording and production major, you're still performing in ensembles. And so I think there's something that's really nice about that, where we're training musicians and everyone is making music along with the full complement of academic classes within music and beyond music. And so I think it makes for a really strong, well-rounded program.
I see a question on do you have a requirement to attend performances, and do students need to pay to attend performances? If you're visiting other schools, it's common for schools to have something called a recital attendance requirement, which requires you to go to a certain number of events every quarter or every semester. The way we do that at DU is that we do it through convocation. So we have typically 3 convocations every quarter, and or at least 3 convocations, sometimes more. And we take attendance at those events. We don't have a requirement of going to a certain number of concerts or recitals every quarter. Specific to paying for concerts, all the events that we produce in Lamont are free to students. What's the nice thing about Lamont being in the Newman Center of the Performing Arts is that the Newman Center is a performing arts center. So it has its own artist series, actually a number of different types of series on various themes. We also, being a performing arts center, are used by outside vendors as well, such as the Society for the Chamber Music, the Friends of Chamber Music Society. With the Friends of Chamber Music Society, if you were to reserve a seat in advance and pick it up by a certain time, you could get it free. Otherwise, you would have to pay. If you do pay for some events, you will find of those events outside of Lamont, for many of them, you can get discounts. Now, I say many of them because the Newman Center has a number of vendors who come in and use the facility, and they will have all different policies. So I hope that gives you a sense of the breadth of not only of the events that are going on in the Newman Center, those produced by Lamont, those produced by the Newman Center of the Performing Arts, and also by outside vendors, and whether some indeed are free or paid.
Aaron asked a question about living on campus or near campus for grad students. Yeah, so for grad students, typically our grad students are living in the surrounding areas, not on campus. There are some very limited opportunities for grad students to live on campus, but typically on-campus housing is reserved for our first and second year undergraduate students. There is a wide range of graduate housing opportunities off campus, and there are some resources on our website that we will start hitting more and more once you're admitted, to say, hey, take a look at and start really getting an idea of what it's going to cost to live off campus. I would say that the majority of our graduate students probably live together, right, in smaller, in houses with a number of people to defray the costs of living. Aaron, there is and I'll try and drop it in the chat. There is a estimate for cost of attendance on our website specific to the Arts and Humanities College within which Lamont resides. And that'll give you an idea of what the range is. It's based on average costs of our students. But there are a lot of opportunities, and often from what I hear from our grad students is that that's actually a positive experience, right? You're getting to further your networks, right? Those friendships with other musicians who you're going to live with. In particular, some of the jazz work studies in my office would always talk about how there's jam sessions every night, right? Because they're living with other musicians, and it's just this kind of continuation of engaging in things that they're all they're all passionate about. But Aaron, I will drop in the Q&A the link to the cost of attendance page on our website, which I think will be helpful.
Right. So I'm going to, if it's okay, I'm going to circle back for a second. There were a couple of questions, sort of follow-up questions that had to do with student composers and their compositions and things like that. One had to do with training to be able to, let's say, conduct your own works. And so this is something that happens. All music majors take a basic conducting class, and we also have advanced conducting classes that students can do beyond that if they want to. So there is indeed some amount of training in terms of leading rehearsals, leading performances, including of your own music. The other one that seemed related was a question about, in the jazz and commercial music area, if student compositions got performed. And just to say, I mean, this is something that really, really impresses me, is how often the faculty don't just, let's say, work in the occasional student performance, but so many of the jazz groups, including up to the top big band, will have the core of their repertoire are charts that are written by the students, and who are writing them for themselves and rehearsing them and performing them, and not just internally, but going out to festivals and compositions and playing the students' own works. It's really quite exciting to see.
Rachel, related to grad students, connecting with other grad students, there are a couple opportunities. There is an admitted student Facebook page that you will have access to, usually in March at some point, that will help start making those connections. And then one of the other things that we always suggest is reaching out to your applied professor, or the person who you're going to study with once you end up at DU, and just ask about their studio, right? Start saying, a lot of times professors have a pretty good idea of where their students are, and whether or not they're looking for roommates, and if nothing else, they're more connected to that network, and so they can help you kind of walk through that. But like I say, you'll get more information about that once you're admitted in March, and hopefully those resources will be helpful.
There was a question about accompanists and how to play with accompanists and rehearse and do. We have to pay them out of pocket for rehearsals and recitals. It depends. And the reason why I say that is that that piano majors are assigned to accompany some students. That's a process that the faculty works with each other on making those particular assignments, so that there seems to be a better match between what the repertoire is and the student who will be playing it. We don't have piano majors who we don't have enough piano majors to cover every student. We have quite a number of students who indeed need accompanists. So we do have professional accompanists also on hand. If those professional accompanists are used, they do need to be paid. So they have there are some who have a certain number of hours for which that are covered. But after those hours are expended, then they do pay. This would be for rehearsal and performance.
I see a question about work study, and I love work study, so I'm going to take that one really quick. Yes, there are opportunities for work study at Lamont. It's through the Office of Financial Aid, so make sure you submit your FAFSA. There are opportunities at the undergrad and grad level for that, and I am a huge advocate of work study because A, it helps you afford your education, for one, but like Lane asks, there are opportunities within Lamont, and so many of us who are in administrative roles, in music schools in particular, are here because we had a work study position while we were in grad school or undergrad, and realized that there were a number of careers in music that we just hadn't considered yet. And so, Lane, I'm not saying that we will indoctrinate you into music administration if you decide to do a work study award at Lamont, but I have found that it typically increases the opportunities that a student is aware of. And so, yes, long answer to your short question, there are work study opportunities at Lamont. Make sure you submit your FAFSA.
I saw there was a question about film scoring. And so, I mean, I suppose I should say right out that we do not have any sort of traditional film scoring program that happens. But there's a film department at DU. There's also a department that is called Emergent Digital Practices, EDP. And so there are lots of sort of visuals and music making that are happening together in ways. And there are there's kind of a program that's sort of bubbling up right now, which is in the midst of forming, which is going to more formalize, I think, this kind of relationship. So what I would say is that there are definitely, we're definitely not some sort of mecca or hub of film scoring, but for students that are interested in this, they definitely can get their feet wet and start exploring those sorts of opportunities while they're here too.
So we're drawing near to that 5:30 mark. And so looks like we have a couple questions left. And maybe, Jack, would you mind answering the question about how many lessons somebody can take each quarter, and maybe just talking about the quarter system more broadly?
Sure. Yeah. The quarter system is definitely something of a strange animal. I mean, I kind of grew up in a semester system, and the first time was only at DU that I've experienced a quarter system. That may be true for many of my colleagues as well. So yeah, the quarter system, I suppose it's closer to a trimester system in that there's a summer quarter, but not as much is really happening over the summer. So really it's a fall, a winter, and a spring. So over the course of a year, it's about the same. Instead of 2 15-week semesters, we've got basically 3 10-week quarters that are going on. So let's say in terms of sequences of classes and things like that, it's about the same. So for lessons, it's about the same, right? You would have 10 lessons a quarter. You get about 30 lessons a year, and that would be about the same as if you were on a semester system. So the way that the rhythm of the year feels is a little bit different or strange or something like that, where we start our fall quarter in kind of early to mid-September. We go through Thanksgiving or so. So we have the sort of 10 weeks there, kind of feels like a very compact fall. And then we have this nice long winter break that goes roughly from Thanksgiving through New Year's. And then we have the winter quarter starting in early January, spring break, and then the spring quarter. And so it can get, it's fairly exhausting by the time we get to the end of spring quarter, because it can feel like a too long spring semester after the sort of slightly too short fall semester. But it's really 3 equal quarters as we kind of progress through the year. So what would I say? So for things like lessons, for ensembles, it's very similar to a semester system. It's the same number of lessons, the same number of rehearsals over the course of a year. The advantage to the quarter system is particularly in the realm of exploring, right? So because you have in a 4-year undergraduate career, let's say, you have 12 quarters instead of 8 semesters. So there are more opportunities to try classes out, to try different things, and to get your feet wet with different things. And that really is the main, I think, the main plus of being on the quarter system. And I don't know if either of Stephen or Keith want to add anything to that.
I'd agree. I'd agree with you, she said, Jack.
Yeah, no, I don't have anything to add to that either. That sounds great. We're at 5:30, and so I want to be respectful of all of your time commitments. I'm going to drop my email address in the chat. Please copy that down. If you have any questions we didn't get to or you didn't feel comfortable asking in a more public forum, that's what I'm here for. So shoot me an email. We can set up a Zoom meeting, or we can just exchange emails, whatever you're most comfortable with. I know it's a cliche, but there are no dumb questions. This is a complicated and confusing process at times. And you'll find, I think, not just at Lamont, but in general, that admission people and music admission people that's what we like doing, right? We're here to have these conversations with you. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And in closing, just thank you all so much for tuning in and asking such great questions and being so engaging. I do hope that this was helpful to you. Thank you to Keith and Jack for representing Lamont here. And we wish you all the absolute best in this holiday season. Please stay safe and healthy. And we hope to learn more about you in the next coming months. We'll talk soon. And here's my email. Great. Well, I'll stick around a little bit longer just so you can copy that email. Otherwise, farewell. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you for being here.